For 3 years, no rain fell on Israel. The rivers dried into cracked mud. The fields turned to dust, and the herds grew thin and desperate across a land that had once flowed with abundance. And the man responsible for that drought, a lone prophet with no army and no throne, was about to walk alone onto a mountain to face 450 men who wanted him dead. He had no soldiers behind him, no king on his side, no crowd cheering for his cause. The king himself had called him the troubler of Israel. The queen had sworn to kill every prophet of the Lord she could find. And yet this one man climbed the slopes of Mount Carmel that morning with a single staggering demand: let the God who answers by fire be God. His name was Elijah, and this is a story of the day one man's unshakable faith stood against an entire nation's compromise, and the fire that fell to settle the question once and for all. Israel, in the days of King Ahab, had drifted far from the Lord. Ahab had married Jezebel, a Sidonian princess devoted to Baal, the storm and fertility god of Canaan, and Asherah, the goddess worshipped alongside him. Under Jezebel's influence, altars to Baal rose across the land. Prophets of the Lord were hunted down and killed. Jezebel herself kept 400 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah at her own table, funded by the throne itself. The scripture summarizes Ahab's reign with a chilling verdict. He did more to arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than did all the kings of Israel before him. Into this spiritual darkness, the Lord sent Elijah the Tishbite, a prophet from Gilead, a rugged region east of the Jordan. Elijah appeared before Ahab with a declaration that would define the next 3 years of Israel's history. As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word. It was not Elijah's own power that would withhold the rain. It was a direct confrontation with Baal himself, the very God the people believed controlled the storms and the harvest. If Baal was truly the God of rain and fertility, Israel was about to discover, in the most painful way possible, whether that claim held any weight at all. For 3 years, the drought held. The Lord sent Elijah into hiding, first by a desolate ravine where ravens brought him bread and meat, and later to the home of a poor widow in Zarephath, where a jar of flour and a jug of oil miraculously never ran dry through the length of the famine. While Israel starved and searched, the man responsible for their suffering was quietly sustained by the very God he served, a small but pointed reminder that the Lord provides for his own even in the middle of judgment. By the 3rd year, the famine had grown severe throughout Samaria. Ahab himself was forced to search the land for grass to keep his horses and mules alive, splitting the search with Obadiah, the palace administrator, a devout believer who had secretly hidden 100 prophets of the Lord in caves during Jezebel's purge, feeding them bread and water at great personal risks to his own life and standing at court. Ahab took one route through the land, and Obadiah took another, each covering separate ground in the desperate hope of finding enough grass to spare even a portion of the royal herds. It was Obadiah who encountered Elijah first on the road, and the prophet gave him a simple instruction: "Go tell your master, Elijah is here." Obadiah was terrified. He feared that the moment he told Ahab, the Spirit of the Lord would carry Elijah away somewhere else, leaving Obadiah to face Ahab's fury for a false report, a fury that could easily cost him his life. Elijah reassured him that he would indeed present himself to Ahab that very day, and Obadiah went to deliver the message. When Ahab finally saw Elijah, his greeting revealed exactly how he understood the crisis. "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" he demanded. Elijah's response cut straight through the accusation. "I have not made trouble for Israel," he said, "but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals." The king believed the prophet was the source of the nation's suffering. Elijah made it clear that the true trouble had begun long before he ever opened his mouth, the moment Israel turned to worship a God who could not answer, could not provide, and could not save. Then Elijah issued his challenge: "Summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah at Jezebel's table." It was an audacious demand, a lone man calling the king to assemble the very forces that wanted him dead on a mountain before the watching eyes of the entire nation, and astonishingly, Ahab agreed. The people gathered on Mount Carmel, a high ridge overlooking the Mediterranean coast, a place traditionally associated with Baal worship itself, chosen perhaps deliberately as the very ground where the contest would be most meaningful. Elijah stood before the assembled crowd and spoke words that cut to the heart of Israel's spiritual confusion. "How long will you waver between two opinions?" he asked. "If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him." The people said nothing. Not a single voice answered. Their silence was itself an indictment, proof of a nation that had stopped choosing anything at all, drifting comfortably between two altars, offering just enough devotion to each to avoid fully committing to either. Then Elijah laid out the terms of the contest with total clarity. He alone remained as a prophet of the Lord, he said, while Baal had 450 prophets of Baal present. 2 bulls would be brought forward. The prophets of Baal would choose one, cut it into pieces, and place it on the wood without setting fire to it. Elijah would do the same with the other bull. Then each side would call on the name of their God. The God who answered by setting fire to the sacrifice, that God was God, indeed. The people responded, "What you say is good." The prophets of Baal went first, given the entire morning to call on their God. They prepared their bull and shouted, "Baal, answer us," from early morning until noon, circling the altar they had built with growing desperation. Nothing happened. No fire fell, no voice answered. They danced around the altar they had made, their cries growing louder and more desperate as the hours dragged on. At noon, Elijah began to mock them, and there's a sharp and almost startling edge to his words. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." So they shouted louder still, and following their ritual custom, slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. They kept up their frantic prophesying through the afternoon, working themselves into a frenzy that lasted well past the time for the evening sacrifice, but there was no response, no reply, no one paying attention. Quick announcement before we continue. After so many requests, the Bible Chronicles animation course is now available. It walks you through the full workflow from script writing to editing and finishing with music and sound effects, so you can produce your own videos with confidence. If you are ready to start creating, the course is now available. Click the link in the description to enroll. Then it was Elijah's turn. He called the people to gather closer around him, and the first thing he did was repair the altar of the Lord, an altar that had been torn down during the years of Baal worship, using 12 stones representing the 12 tribes descended from Jacob, the man to whom the Lord said, "Your name shall be Israel." A deliberate act binding this moment to the entire covenant history of the nation standing before him. He dug a trench around the altar large enough to hold about 2 seahs of seed, arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and placed it on top of the wood. Then Elijah did something that made his eventual victory even more astonishing. He instructed the people to fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and the wood. "Do it again," he said, and they did it a second time. "Do it a third time," he said, and they did it a third time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench he had dug. There was no possibility of trickery here. No dry spark, no dry kindling waiting for a secret flame. Elijah had deliberately made the task as impossible as he could, ensuring that whatever happened next could belong to no one but God. At the time of the evening sacrifice, Elijah stepped forward and prayed a prayer remarkably for its brevity and its confidence. "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Notice what Elijah asked for. Not vindication for himself, not victory for his own reputation, but the restoration of a wandering nation's heart toward the God they had abandoned. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and it licked up the water in the trench. There was no ambiguity, no partial answer, no room for explanation beyond the obvious. The fire consumed everything, down to the stones themselves and the water that had pooled around them. When the people saw this, they fell prostrate on the ground and cried out, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" The same crowd that had stood silent when Elijah first challenged them
now spoke with a single, unified voice. Elijah then commanded the people to seize the prophets of Baal, and none of them escaped. He had them brought down to the Kishon Valley and executed them there, closing the door on the corrupt religious system Jezebel had built and funded for years, a system responsible for leading the nation astray and for the blood of the Lord's own prophets hunted down in her purges. The story of Elijah at Mount Carmel is one of the most dramatic and clarifying moments in all of Scripture, and it still speaks powerfully into our own lives because Elijah's opening question was never really about Baal at all. How long will you waver between two opinions is a question that reaches far beyond ancient altars and stone idols. It asks whether we are truly devoted to God or simply keeping Him as one option among several, giving Him just enough attention to feel spiritually responsible while reserving our deepest trust for something else entirely: our careers, our comfort, our reputation, our own ability to control